So, every morning when I sit at my breakfast, I'm thinking, what I should speak about when I meet all of us here in this group. And it's always a surprise, what comes up, because I don't plan it much. And then, over the week, I'm reading things and I'm doing trainings. And sometimes, I look into the news, and then whatever comes up at that breakfast for me, then I'll take that as a jumping board for what I talk about, what I bring to the group. And today, what came to my mind is that proverb, which all of you have heard probably many times: the path is made by walking. And it's so much aligned with the Buddha's teaching, actually, how the Buddha describes what's called, the middle way, or the Noble Eightfold Path, which, is appearing as we are walking it. Through the causes and conditions, we are setting in place through the way we apply ourselves to the practice. That's how the path appears. And there's always like a great deal of uncertainty and unpredictability, but we do have clarity how to relate to that uncertainty and unpredictability. That's, what the Buddha's teaching is all about, giving us instructions how to relate to our experience. He doesn't say, what it is, but he gives us a lot of guidance in how to relate to it. And then, we can start to notice, do we shut down? Do we distract ourselves? Do we have a repetition compulsion because of some unresolved trauma? Or are we able, to stay open? And everything in between. That is the path, leading us to ever greater openness in relationship to our own experience. So we can say we have certainty on how to relate to uncertainty. That's what we do have. And I think that's a good way, to get started and to remember that. When we are, caught up in the flood of the thinking mind, it's most important to come back into the body. Grounding ourselves in this direct experience of the elements that make up our bodies. And we have had, several occasions of the guidance of the elements. I was bringing that to us, experiencing directly in the body, earth element, water element, fire element, wind element, and space element, and consciousness element as well. And coming back to that very direct experience, which is not easy to be with, because the mind is so addicted to thinking about experience rather than directly being with it. But that's why it's a training, because it's very, very simple in terms of, intellectual understanding. There's not much needed, but it's not easy to do, because the discomfort of that direct experience, usually always drives us into going back into our thought patterns and splitting off the energy from the body into the head, and then just thinking. And because we try to kind of get away from the pain, which needs to be felt, needs to be sensed in order to open up the flow. We could say, the discomfort is kind of the gateway into a greater openness. Because we can virtually liquefy those blockages if we have a perseverance and patience, and the Buddha is on record for having said, patient perseverance is the most important ingredient for the holy life. This very simple, very humble practice of patient perseverance is not very glorious, but that's it, what makes the transformation possible. And I've brought a quote by Ajahn Pasano, who is the previous abbot of Abhayagiri Monastery, who is also, quite senior monk in the Ajahn Chah tradition and has trained with Ajahn Chah himself. And he said, that I'm quoting him here, I remember Ajahn Chah saying one time, addressing the issue of wanting to really push and then feeling frustrated by that. And then he said, Ajahn Chah said, can you just learn to practice like an earthworm? They can't know where they are going. They're just like going on, putting their head down, just go, just have earthworm practice. But keep moving, keep being constant, keep being consistent. So exactly, that very humble quality of being consistent and digesting basically those old data which have been sidelined, because when they happened, we weren't able to open to it because we were maybe very small children or infants. And that's the intelligence, of the trauma response is if it's not possible to deal with something, if there is danger of being overwhelmed, the mind has an inbuilt evolutionary capacity to not attend. But then, those unattended data packages, they are frozen in the body. And as we are practicing, we start to unfreeze those data packages. And then the unfelt feelings, the unfelt sensations, they come up for consideration. Then we need to turn towards those, one step at a time, of course. And through that, we come back to life, through digesting these old data packages, by feeling and sensing. And it's not so much about what it is, but how we are relating to that. That's so important, the simplicity of that, opening to the mind to all that is there. And then the path appears, by walking. Often, we put the foot down into mid-air and then the path appears. And this is why it is so scary. And in that way, we're rekindling what we already know. It's an unlearning, it's a shedding, it's a letting go. We are not, getting more luggage to carry along through practicing the Buddha's teaching. It's the opposite. It's about putting things down. Because the essence of the Buddha's teachings isn't a body of knowledge, which can be remembered, word for word, but it's much more like an intuitive knowing how to relate to our experience, an intuitive deep trust, that whatever arises is impermanent and unsatisfactory and empty of a self. That's really the essence, the timeless essence of the teachings. And in order for that practice, to start, we need to quiet the mind by grounding ourselves. And that's already, we know how to do this. This is not rocket science, And then when the mind becomes quiet and is settled down, it becomes more and more coherent, because those patterns, those old patterns, they are in abeyance, for the time being. And there is more clarity taking place. And then through that clarity, our intuition can start to blossom. So just let's find a posture we can sustain for about 40 minutes. And as I often say, you don't have to work hard. It's much more about coming into the body and allowing the sense of gravity to gently show you where you come from and where you belong. You know, this living intelligent earth, which is carrying all of us, even we are sitting on different spots on the grid around the globe. So coming to the direct experience of the body, which is made of the elements, which is not separate from the planet, and where we know that there's a constant exchange happening between the elements which make up the biosphere and the elements which make up our bodies at this point. And within 7 years, it's all changing. It takes about 7 years for a body to be completely replaced. And if we, remember reflecting on how small and tiny our bodies were when we were born, and how different they are looking now, of course, that's not the same body. And through eating, drinking, breathing, going to the bathroom, sweating and crying, there have been so many loops, of exchange between the biosphere and our bodies. It's kind of amazing to reflect on this. And through this reflection, we are slowly but surely improving our perception. And with that, also our response. We, more and more able to take on responsibility rather than just reacting. It's a healing process, really. And before we go deeper, just noticing what you're bringing to this session, how the body is doing emotional and the mind. Just taking a short screenshot. And allowing, our nervous system to guide us. And also, reflecting why you have come here today to this session. Why are you practicing? and feeling, the connection to the earth, the non-separation, the embeddedness in this vast field of intelligence. Which is becoming conscious to many of us now at this time of, eco-social crisis. It's like an unveiling. The word apocalypse means, to unveil something, to remove layers of confusion, to remove filters. And then seeing something or intuiting something which we didn't know before consciously. It was hidden to us in plain sight because it wasn't yet the time for that unveiling to happen. Yeah, and quantum physics, tells us that everything around us and in us is like an informational field. And we are basically living inside of this vast field of intelligence, which we can learn to relate to by removing filters. So it's an unlearning rather than adding something we don't really know yet. It's an unlearning, letting go of that which is in between those defense layers. That's a gradual training which can be done. And we are the organs of that intelligence and also its activity. And, through the practice, we can be more and more intuitively connected and be recipients of that truth, of that information, to the degree we are ready. And that's a question of training, of, unlearning those patterns, those repetitions, like a hamster in a wheel. And some of them are personal, individual, some of them are ancestral, and some of them are collective. And at this point in history, a certain collective layer is becoming conscious regarding, our relationship to Earth, our relationship to the planet. We are pushed, to let that become conscious. We are pushed by by the planet herself. Through those, ecological tragedies which are happening, which are so many right now that we can no longer pretend it's not happening. That most, more and more people are coming on board. It's not a question anymore. But it's still a question how to work with all of this. Even there's a lot of information already there, technological and also money, but still to organize this transition is extremely complex. So, to increase our mind's capacity to handle complexity, first of all, it needs to be intimate with its own home base, which is the body. And intimacy with the body, with the sensations and the feelings, allows increasing capacity for complexity. So being able to listen into what is emerging at the edge of our field of conscious experience. So being able to stay open to that unknown as a teacher. And even, develop a relationship with it. By listening with the heart rather than with the mind. We can even, imagine the ears are in the heart area. So really listening with the whole body rather than with the ears only. It's an embodied listening. That's in a new way of using the body as a instrument for receiving more consciously from everything which we are embedded in. So the body as an organ of listening. And as we are learning to do this, our sense of mastery and sense of being a special species and all of that starts to disintegrate. And that's a good thing. It brings us into a humility, which is a prerequisite, for starting to commune more fully with that which is so much vaster than us. And is pregnant with possibility. The biosphere, is an incredibly vast field of intelligence. It has a constant data flow happening and always has happened, but we weren't aware of it. And now, because of what the situation is in the world right now, we start to awaken to it as a species, because that's simply the next evolutionary step to be made in order to grow our capacity to be, true organs and receivers of this vast field we are embedded in. And then the activity will flow forth from that. The intuition, the genius, for living in new ways will blossom from that. By composting old ways, the new has a chance to flourish. That's what's meant rather, the path is made by walking. Being on the edge of what we know and feeling ourselves to be drawn in this way brings up fear because of the uncertainty, but also it brings up a true sense of purpose, of being part of that unfolding. And making ourselves available for that. Can be, quite enlivening. And energizing. The sense of purpose in all of this. Difficulties. which helps us to steady ourselves and keep opening. And being willing to forego the so-called safety of the old ways, because it isn't really safe. The only safety lies in opening to what is true, even if it's scary at times. And especially, seeing that there are others who are on the same path, on the same wavelength, that can really help. And there's that inkling of that we are being authored by something so much vaster than our thinking mind. And the thinking mind is more like a worker, which is then materializing and organizing that what we know. And that what we know is so much vaster and comes in a very different way. As we are noticing that we're not separate and that we are a representation of biosphere. So noticing, sensing that non-separability. That's how we can ground ourselves and at the same time opening. By coming back home to the body, and starting also to notice that what we see around us is actually us. On the ultimate level. Then, you know, the thinking mind surrenders because he can't really get a foothold. And then something else takes over, and we call it the heart. And the thinking mind can serve that, but he can't control it. So when the mind is quiet, you know, it's so much easier to connect with that non-separation. And you know, when we are triggered or stressed, then the patternings of the mind, you know, come over us again, so to say. Like the waves, you know, become really powerful. And the learning is, you know, to stay with direct experience when the waves get really high. And allow, you know, the discomfort to open us up. So we can step out of these old repetitions. You know, healing that repetition compulsion through patient and kind attending to those patterns. rather than buying into them, just sensing what's underneath, feeling that, frozen data package from the past and allowing it to transform. And often, when we're in a process like that, we get really hot in the body. That's the fire element, is about transformation. And the wind element is about movement. We're aware of the breathing process, constant movement. The earth element is the structure. And the water element is shaping the structure. The emotional domain is the water element. And this body sits in space. In a limitless space which doesn't end at the walls of the room. And then, that which knows about all of this. Becoming conscious of that as well. Awareness. Becoming aware of itself. And the gentle joy or contentment when the mind isn't grasping to anything. The mind is wide open. And not picking and choosing. So we're slowly coming to the end of the meditation. Coming back, to sensing the weight, the body and the movement of the breathing. And taking away that knowing that we are the organs and the activity of that vast field of intelligence. And we can train ourselves to be more conscious of that, even through very challenging periods. And we need to start where we are. And we can do this, as a community.